It was a bright, sunny afternoon, and the city park was alive with activity. Children ran across the green grass, their laughter echoing through the open spaces. Parents sat on benches, keeping an eye on their little ones, while some were busy chatting or enjoying snacks from nearby food stalls. The sound of birds and distant traffic mixed together, giving the park a lively, normal kind of energy that made people feel safe and relaxed. Among the crowd were the Rock and John Cena, though no one around them realized it at first. They were enjoying a rare day off, taking a break from the constant cameras, interviews, and busy schedules that usually filled their lives. Both of them liked to spend time in ordinary places sometimes, blending in with the crowd, observing life as it unfolded around them. It gave them a sense of peace and a chance to breathe in a world where they weren't constantly in the spotlight. They were walking slowly, talking quietly about small things, what they had eaten for breakfast, some of the funny interactions they had with fans recently, and the little joys they noticed while just being out in public. But as they walked past a playground, something caught their attention, and both men froze for a moment. A little girl, maybe around 6 or 7, was holding the hand of a man who looked much older. At first it seemed like a simple scene, an adult and a child walking together. But there was something unusual, something off, that neither The Rock nor John Cena could ignore. The man's grip on the girl's hand was tight, almost too tight, and the girl seemed hesitant, her small frame tense. She wasn't smiling, and her eyes kept darting around as if she was unsure of her surroundings or the man she was with. Instincts aren't something that can easily be described. They are subtle, quiet warnings that tell you something isn't right, even when everything seems normal on the surface. Both The Rock and John Cena had learned to trust their instincts over the years. It didn't matter that they were famous or that the park seemed safe, or that there were plenty of people around. Their experience, their training, and their natural awareness told them to pay attention. They exchanged a brief, knowing look. Neither needed to say anything. They didn't need words to communicate. It was understood that something about this situation wasn't right, and they couldn't just walk away. They decided to follow the man carefully, making sure they didn't draw attention to themselves and, most importantly, making sure they didn't scare the little girl. The man moved quickly through the crowd, taking small, deliberate steps, his eyes scanning the area constantly. He seemed to avoid families, vendors, and other adults who might notice him. The little girl walked alongside him, clutching a small backpack tightly against her chest. She was quiet, too quiet for a child her age, and every now and then she would glance up at him, her expression uncertain. The Rock and John Cena kept their distance, but they were close enough to see clearly. Every now and then, The Rock would subtly adjust his pace, ensuring that the man didn't notice them, while John kept an eye on any escape routes. Both men were aware that public situations could escalate quickly, so they remained calm, composed, and careful. As they followed, John leaned slightly toward The Rock and whispered, "There's something wrong here. Look at her. She's scared." His voice was low, calm, but there was an unmistakable seriousness to it. The Rock nodded, his eyes never leaving the pair ahead of them. "Yeah," he replied quietly. "We need to stay close but careful. We can't make this worse for her." For several minutes they moved silently behind the man, keeping their presence subtle. They noticed the man starting to change direction, heading toward less populated streets. He was avoiding the main park paths, choosing narrow alleys and quieter areas where fewer people could see them. It was clear that he was trying not to be noticed, and that made The Rock and John Cena even more certain that something was wrong. The little girl's steps became slower, hesitant, as if she didn't want to go wherever the man was taking her. Her small fingers gripped the strap of her backpack tighter, and her eyes looked around nervously. Occasionally she would glance up at the man, perhaps expecting reassurance, but there was none. The tension in her body was obvious, even from a distance. Both men understood that timing was critical. Acting too soon could scare the man and the girl, making the situation dangerous. Waiting too long could also put the child at risk. They needed to stay alert, watch every move, and be ready to step in at the right moment. As they turned another corner, they saw the man glance over his shoulder more frequently. He seemed anxious now, his pace quickening slightly. It was as if he was aware that someone might be following him, even though he didn't see The Rock and John Cena. Their careful observation and training helped them anticipate his movements, keeping them a step ahead without alarming him. The child's small voice whispered something just low enough for only herself to hear. The men couldn't make out the words, but they caught the sound of fear and hesitation in her tone. It was enough to strengthen their resolve. They would not let anything happen to her. Not today. The city's busy streets faded behind them as they followed the man into quieter, more isolated areas. The usual chatter of families, the laughter of children, the calls of vendors, all of it disappeared. The man was leading the child away from public view, and the sense of urgency grew stronger with every step. John Cena adjusted his position slightly, making sure they remained discreet while keeping the man and child in sight. "We're getting closer to where this could go wrong," he muttered. The Rock didn't reply, but his jaw tightened and his eyes narrowed. He was already thinking ahead, about how to intervene safely, how to protect the child, and how to prevent the man from reacting violently. The little girl's small shoulders hunched slightly, as if she was carrying invisible weight on them. Her steps became uneven, and she looked around nervously, almost as if she was hoping someone would notice her. The Rock noticed the subtle signs, the way she held herself, the way she avoided eye contact with the man, and the way she seemed to shrink in his presence. It was a quiet reminder that heroism doesn't always happen in rings, on screens, or in stadiums. Sometimes it happens in ordinary places in plain sight, when someone notices something others overlook. That realization made both men even more determined to act wisely and carefully. The man turned into a narrow alley, barely wide enough for a car to pass. He glanced around quickly, his eyes darting from side to side, and the child followed, her small steps hesitant and unsure. The Rock and John Cena slowed their pace slightly, blending in with shadows and people nearby, making sure they remained unnoticed. The child paused, looking back for just a second. Her eyes were wide, filled with uncertainty and fear, and for the first time, she saw the reassuring presence of the Rock and John Cena behind them. Even if she didn't fully understand who they were, something in her instinct told her that help was near. The Rock's heart tightened. He had seen fear in children before, but this was different. There was something fragile and urgent about this child's fear. He adjusted his stance, ready to step in at a moment's notice. John Cena did the same, his presence calm but strong, ready to protect. As the alley stretched ahead, the man's pace quickened again, and the little girl's hesitancy grew. It was clear that the child was uncomfortable, and that the man's intentions might not be innocent. The Rock and Cena exchanged a subtle glance, silently agreeing that the moment to intervene would be soon. They weren't rushing. They weren't panicking. They were calculating, observing, and preparing. Every step the man took, every glance he gave, every small movement of the child was being noted. Their plan was simple: protect the child, control the situation, and prevent any harm, all without escalating fear or danger. For the first time, the little girl allowed a small glimmer of hope to touch her expression. It was fleeting, but it was there. She didn't know who these men were yet, but she sensed that they could help her. And in situations like this, instinct matters more than names, fame, or appearances. The Rock and John Cena followed quietly, keeping their presence hidden yet close enough to react instantly. The tension in the air was palpable, like the calm before a storm, but neither of them hesitated. They knew what they had to do. And in that quiet, tense moment, a silent promise was made. No matter what, this child would be safe. The alley was quiet and narrow, the walls on either side tall and shadowed. The sounds of the busy park had faded behind them, replaced by the echo of the man's quick footsteps and the soft, hesitant steps of the little girl. The tension in the air was almost tangible, like a thin thread stretched so tight that the slightest tug could break it. The Rock and John Cena moved carefully, staying just far enough behind to remain unnoticed but close enough to step in at a moment's notice. The girl clutched her small backpack tighter, her tiny fingers pressing into the straps as if holding onto it would somehow protect her from the situation she didn't fully understand. Her eyes flicked nervously toward the man, then back at the shadows ahead, as if she were searching for help without knowing exactly where it might come from. John Cena glanced at the Rock, his expression serious. "He's moving faster," he said quietly, careful not to draw attention. "And..." "She's slowing down. She doesn't want to go with him." The Rock nodded. He had noticed it too. The way she hesitated, the way her small body seemed to shrink under the man's grip. It told him everything he needed to know. "We have to stay calm," he whispered back. Don't rush. We can't scare her or him. We wait for the right moment. The man, unaware of the two men quietly tracking him, turned another corner. This one led to a side street that was even quieter, almost empty. A few parked cars lined the side, their metal frames casting long, distorted shadows in the late afternoon sun. He glanced over his shoulder again, his eyes narrowing, as if sensing that someone might be following him. But there was no one he could see. The little girl's steps became slower, almost dragging as she tried to resist being pulled forward. Her small voice whispered something barely audible. The Rock's ears caught it just faintly enough to make his heart tighten. She was scared. She didn't understand why she was being led away, but she knew instinctively that something was wrong. John Cena adjusted his pace to match the shadows along the street. "Look at her," he murmured. "She's frozen with fear. He's forcing her to move faster than she wants." The Rock didn't reply, but his mind was working fast. He knew that at any moment the situation could escalate. If the man noticed them now, he could panic. If the girl sensed sudden force from them, she might become more frightened. It was a delicate balance, a moment that required patience, attention, and calm. The man turned again, heading toward what appeared to be an abandoned parking lot. The space was empty, dusty, and isolated, far from any pedestrian traffic. The walls of nearby buildings cast long shadows across the cracked pavement, making the area feel colder than the sunlit streets they had just left. The man's grip on the girl's hand tightened. She didn't struggle, but her small body trembled ever so slightly. The Rock signaled to John with a subtle nod. It was time to prepare for action. They had to be careful, but they couldn't wait any longer. The longer the girl stayed with the man, the more vulnerable she became. Both men adjusted their positions, moving into better spots where they could approach safely, without startling anyone or making the man panic. As they moved closer, they noticed the little girl beginning to glance around, almost as if she could sense that someone was nearby. Her small eyes were wide with fear and confusion. She didn't know who might help her, but she hoped silently that someone would. The Rock spoke gently under his breath. "Stay calm. We're right here." His voice carried no threat, no tension, only reassurance. John Cena mirrored the same approach, keeping his movements slow and deliberate, staying close but still hidden behind a shadowed wall. The man glanced at the cars parked nearby, seemingly considering the best way to get the girl into one of them. His eyes darted nervously, scanning the area as if he were calculating how to escape quickly, but he didn't see the two imposing figures following him quietly, moving like shadows themselves. The girl's small hand trembled as she held onto his. She wanted to pull away, but she didn't know how. She couldn't speak loudly. She feared his reaction, and yet somewhere deep inside a spark of hope flickered. She felt, though she didn't fully understand it, that someone might notice and help her soon. John Cena whispered to the Rock, "We need to separate them carefully. One wrong move and she could panic." The Rock nodded, eyes focused on the child. "We'll do it gently. She has to feel safe." As the man began to open the door of a parked car, the Rock moved slightly, stepping into a position that would allow him to shield the girl immediately if needed. John Cena mirrored him, ready to act fast but without sudden movement that could startle either of them. Every second felt like an eternity, the tension building with every silent breath. The little girl looked up, her wide eyes meeting the shadows nearby. She couldn't see faces clearly, but she sensed strength and calm. Her heart skipped a beat and her small voice whispered again, this time with a hint of hope. The Rock and John Cena's instincts told them she could respond positively if they acted gently and confidently. The man tried to open the car door quickly, eager to move the girl further away, but his hand hesitated as he sensed something in the shadows. It was instinct, a faint warning that perhaps someone was watching him, but he couldn't be sure. He turned slightly, and that was all the Rock and John Cena needed. With careful steps, the Rock moved closer, his presence calm but commanding. "It's okay," he said softly but firmly. "You're safe. Come with us." The little girl froze, unsure what to do, but she felt a strange sense of relief. Her small body relaxed slightly, and she took a hesitant step toward the direction the Rock was indicating. The man's grip on her hand loosened momentarily, startled by the sudden calm authority in the voice he didn't expect. John Cena stepped in smoothly, positioning himself between the man and the girl. His presence was firm but non-threatening, a wall of safety that didn't intimidate the child but prevented the man from forcing her further. The man's face twisted with frustration and panic. He tried to speak to convince her to go with him, but his voice faltered in the presence of two strong, calm figures who were not about to let the situation get worse. The little girl, sensing protection, allowed herself to be gently guided by the Rock and John Cena. Her small hand slipped from the man's grasp as the Rock knelt slightly, making himself approachable and reassuring. "You're okay now," he said, his voice soft, almost like a hug in words. The man stumbled back, realizing that his control over the situation had vanished. John Cena remained between them, a silent warning that any aggressive move would fail. The tension in the air began to ease slightly as the girl's small body relaxed against the Rock, her breathing becoming steadier. At that moment, both men knew the critical part of their intervention was done. The girl was safe, but the situation was not yet resolved completely. Authorities needed to be involved, and the man needed to be stopped from attempting anything further. John Cena reached for his phone discreetly, calling local security and authorities while keeping his eyes on the man. The Rock stayed with the girl, offering comfort and reassurance. She hugged herself around the small backpack, still shaken but beginning to understand that she was no longer alone. The man looked around frantically, trying to find a way out of the situation, but the presence of the Rock and John Cena made it clear that he couldn't escape. The girl, now more confident with her protectors nearby, even gave a small, tentative smile. It was a tiny sign, but for the two men it was everything. They knew she felt safe now. As the distant sound of approaching police sirens began to echo through the quiet streets, the man's panic increased. He tried to flee, but it was too late. Authorities arrived, moving in quickly but carefully, taking control of the situation. The girl stayed close to the Rock, feeling the warmth and protection of someone she could trust. The Rock whispered softly, "You're safe now. Everything's going to be okay." The little girl nodded slightly, her small shoulders relaxing further as the tension of the past minutes began to melt away. John Cena stayed vigilant until the authorities had the man in custody. Only then did he relax slightly, exhaling deeply. Both men had acted instinctively, calmly, and decisively, ensuring that the child was protected without causing further fear. The little girl's parents, who had been alerted and rushed to the scene, arrived moments later. Their faces were pale with worry, their eyes scanning for any sign of their daughter. When they saw her safe, walking toward them with the Rock and John Cena, relief washed over them like a tidal wave. Tears came unbidden and their voices trembled as they thanked the two men endlessly. The little girl hugged her parents tightly, still holding onto the backpack as if it had been a shield. She looked at the Rock and John Cena, eyes wide with gratitude, and whispered a small, shaky, "Thank you." It was a moment of pure relief, trust, and hope. A reminder that even in the scariest moments, there can be heroes who appear when they are most needed. The moment the authorities arrived, the atmosphere shifted. The quiet tension of the abandoned parking lot was replaced by the low hum of official voices and the sound of footsteps on cracked pavement. Officers quickly assessed the situation, their eyes moving between the man, the child, and the two men who had intervened. The man, now aware that his escape was impossible, began to panic visibly. His face turned pale and he shifted from foot to foot, mumbling to himself in frustration. He realized that the control he thought he had over the situation was gone. For a few moments, he even seemed unsure what to do next, as if he were weighing whether to run or comply. The little girl, meanwhile, clung to the Rock's side, still trembling but slowly regaining a sense of safety. Her small hands gripped his arm and she buried her face slightly, seeking comfort in the presence of someone strong who clearly had her well-being in mind. Her eyes darted to the approaching officers and a small spark of hope flickered across her face. John Cena remained vigilant, standing a step away but keeping his eyes on the man. He spoke in a calm, steady tone, directing the officers toward the proper approach. "He's tense. Don't rush him," he said. "Focus on keeping the child safe first." The officers nodded, understanding the subtle danger. Situations like this could escalate in seconds if handled incorrectly. "These yarn." Rock, seeing the little girl's lingering fear, knelt slightly to bring himself closer to her level. His presence was reassuring, non-threatening, and comforting. "You're okay now," he said softly. "Everything's going to be all right. You're safe." The child hesitated for a moment, still unsure, but she could feel the sincerity in his voice. Slowly, she let her small hands relax around his arm. The rock smiled gently, giving her a nod of encouragement without needing words. It was a silent promise that she could trust him, that she could feel safe. The officers approached the man carefully, their hands ready but not aggressive. They instructed him to place his hands where they could see them, and he complied, though his eyes darted nervously toward the child. The man tried to speak, to explain himself, but his words were jumbled and defensive. The officers listened but maintained control, knowing that the child's safety was the only priority. John Cena moved closer to the girl, speaking to her quietly. "You did really well. You stayed strong. You're safe now." The little girl looked up at him, her eyes wide, and nodded. She was beginning to understand that these strangers were not a threat, but a source of protection. As the officers began asking the man questions, the rock stayed close to the child, keeping his attention on her comfort. He noticed the small tremble in her hands, the way she glanced around nervously, and he realized that even though the immediate danger was over, she still needed reassurance. The little girl's voice was barely audible, but she whispered, "I thought he was going to take me away." The rock's expression softened. "I know," he said gently. "That's why we were here. You didn't have to face that alone." His words carried warmth and calm, and the girl's small body relaxed slightly against him. The man, now fully in the officer's control, was led a few steps away. He continued to mumble excuses and explanations, but no one was paying attention to him at that moment. The child's focus remained on the Rock and John Cena, on the calm presence that had appeared just when she needed it most. One of the officers spoke to the Rock and Cena, asking them to provide details about what they had observed. Both men recounted the sequence of events calmly, describing the man's suspicious behavior, the girl's visible fear, and the way they had intervened to ensure her safety. Their statements were clear, precise, and calm, reflecting their careful attention to detail and understanding of how to handle such situations responsibly. Meanwhile, the little girl's parents arrived. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with worry as they scanned the parking lot for their daughter. When they saw her standing safely with the Rock and John Cena, relief washed over them like a tidal wave. Their legs moved quickly across the cracked pavement and they scooped her into their arms, hugging her tightly as if they would never let go. Tears flowed freely from the mother's eyes, her voice trembling with emotion. Thank you so much," she said repeatedly, looking at the Rock and Cena. "You saved my daughter. I don't know how to ever thank you enough." The father nodded, his own voice breaking. "We were so scared. We didn't know where she was. Thank you for noticing, for helping." The little girl hugged her parents tightly, still clinging to her small backpack but feeling safer now that she was back in familiar arms. She looked at the Rock and Cena once more, her eyes wide with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered softly. The Rock smiled gently, crouching slightly to be on the same level as her. "You're welcome," he said. "You were very brave." John Cena gave her a small nod and a reassuring smile. "You did everything right," he added. "You stayed strong and now you're safe." The officers continued questioning the man, ensuring there was no further risk. The child's parents provided additional details, helping authorities understand the full situation. The man's attempts to explain himself fell apart under scrutiny, revealing that his intentions were not innocent. Throughout all of this, the Rock and Cena stayed by the child's side, offering quiet support and ensuring she felt secure. It wasn't about fame, cameras, or attention. It was about doing what was right, being present, and helping someone who needed protection when it mattered most. As the scene began to calm, the little girl's parents hugged her once more, then turned to thank the Rock and Cena again. "You really were heroes today," the mother said softly. "We will never forget this." The father nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You both stepped in when it counted the most. Thank you for protecting our daughter." The little girl tugged gently on the Rock's arm. "I was scared," she said quietly, "but you made me feel safe." The Rock knelt down, keeping his voice soft and comforting. "I know you were scared," he said. "It's okay to be scared sometimes. But you were brave and you're safe now. That's what matters." John Cena smiled down at her, his tone warm. "And remember, it's okay to ask for help. You don't have to face scary things alone." The child nodded, her small face relaxing for the first time since the incident began. For the first time in what felt like hours, she smiled. A shy, tentative smile that spoke of relief and trust. Even as the authorities escorted the man away, the memory of the fear she had felt would linger. But so would the memory of the two strangers who had appeared just when she needed them most, standing firm, calm, and strong. The Rock and John Cena walked the family to the edge of the parking lot, ensuring the child remained close to her parents and that she felt fully secure. As they waved goodbye, the little girl's parents expressed their gratitude once more. "You saved her," the mother said softly. "We will never forget this day." The Rock nodded, giving her a small, reassuring smile. "You're welcome. The important thing is she's safe and back with you," John Cena added. "And remember, even in ordinary places, there are people who can step in to help. Today was just one of those times." As the family walked away, holding the child tightly between them, the Rock and Cena lingered for a moment, watching to ensure she truly felt safe. Then they stepped back into the shadows, blending into the ordinary streets of the city once again. No one noticed them. No cameras captured their actions. It was a quiet victory, unseen by most but profoundly meaningful to the little girl and her family. The experience stayed with both men. It was a reminder that heroism doesn't always happen under spotlights or in front of cheering crowds. Sometimes it happens quietly in ordinary places, when someone notices danger and acts with care and courage. For the little girl, the memory of fear was replaced with the memory of safety, kindness, and reassurance. She would remember the strong, calm strangers who appeared when she felt helpless, and the lessons of trust and courage they had imparted without words. For the Rock and John Cena, it was another reminder that every life matters, and even small acts of courage and attention can make an enormous difference. And so, the quiet afternoon ended with a sense of relief, gratitude, and hope. A little girl was safe, her parents reassured, and two men who had walked into an ordinary park that day had turned into real-life heroes. Without fanfare, without recognition, just with presence, instinct, and care. After the authorities took control of the situation, the little girl's parents held her close, speaking softly and reassuringly as though the mere sound of their voices could wash away the fear she had felt. Her small hands clung to her mother's shirt, and her tiny shoulders relaxed a little with every step she took. The calm presence of the Rock and John Cena lingered beside her, a quiet shield that gave her the courage to start moving again. The man who had caused so much fear was now being questioned by officers, his earlier confidence replaced by tension and uncertainty. He tried to explain himself, but his words were inconsistent, jumbled, and unconvincing. It became clear that his intentions had not been innocent. The authorities listened carefully, documenting everything while keeping their focus on the safety of the child. The little girl's mother looked at the Rock, eyes still filled with tears. "I can't thank you enough," she said softly. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't noticed and stepped in." The Rock knelt slightly, lowering himself to be at eye level with the child again. "You're safe now," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "That's what matters. You're with your family and nothing can hurt you here." The girl gave a small nod, her lips trembling in a mix of relief and lingering fear. She glanced briefly at John Cena, who smiled warmly at her, offering quiet reassurance. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're brave and now you're safe. You don't have to be scared anymore." The parents guided their daughter gently toward the sidewalk, keeping her between them, while the Rock and Cena followed a few steps behind. The little girl's hands still trembled slightly, but she walked a little taller, understanding now that she wasn't alone. The ordinary city streets around them felt safer, though the memory of fear still lingered. As they walked, a few neighbors and passers-by stopped, curious about the commotion, some even whispering to each other about the events that had just unfolded. The Rock and John Cena remained calm, polite, and focused on the family, ignoring the attention. Their goal wasn't recognition, it was safety and reassurance, and they stayed true to that purpose. The little girl's father looked at the two men and said quietly, "You didn't just protect her. You helped us feel safe again. That's more than anyone could ask for." The child's mother added, her voice trembling, "You noticed when no one else did. You stepped in when it mattered the most. I don't know how to explain how grateful we are." The Rock gave a small nod, his expression softening. "The important thing is that she's okay. You're all together now, and that's what matters. John Cena glanced at the child and offered a final word of encouragement. Remember this feeling, he said. Even when scary things happen, there are people who will help you. You're never alone. The little girl, still holding her parents' hands, looked up at them. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of gratitude, relief, and awe. She whispered softly, "Thank you for saving me." The Rock smiled gently. "You were brave too," he said. "You stayed strong, and that's what helped us help you." John Cena added, "Exactly. You were strong even when you were scared, and now you're safe." The family began walking toward their car, the child nestled safely between them. The Rock and Cena walked alongside, quietly ensuring that nothing unexpected happened, their presence a calm reassurance that the girl was not alone. As they reached the curb, the Rock noticed a small detail, a crumpled piece of paper that the little girl had dropped in her haste earlier. He bent down and picked it up, handing it back to her gently. She took it, a small smile forming on her face as if this tiny act helped restore a sense of normalcy. The child's parents thanked them again, their voices thick with emotion. "We will never forget this," the mother said softly. "You saved more than just her that day. You saved a piece of our hearts." The Rock nodded, giving a reassuring smile. "That's why we do what we do. It's about people, not recognition. Today it was about her, and I'm glad she's safe." John Cena added, "And remember, always trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore it and ask for help." Today, instincts kept her safe. The little girl squeezed her parents' hands tightly, feeling the warmth of their comfort. She looked at the Rock and Cena one last time, her small voice quiet but filled with sincerity. "Thank you," she whispered. The Rock nodded, giving her a small, gentle wave. John Cena mirrored him, smiling warmly. "Take care," he said. "You're going to be okay." As the family walked to their car, the Rock and Cena stepped back into the background. The city around them resumed its normal rhythm, but the memory of the rescue lingered both for them and for the little girl. It was a quiet victory, unseen by most, yet profoundly significant for the family whose lives had been touched so directly. The Rock and Cena watched as the family drove away, the little girl safely nestled between her parents. It was a reminder of how ordinary streets, ordinary parks, and ordinary moments could become extraordinary when someone noticed danger and chose to act. The two men paused, taking a moment to reflect. They didn't need recognition, cameras, or applause. Their satisfaction came from knowing that a child was safe, a family was reassured, and the fear that had filled an afternoon was replaced with calm and hope. John Cena turned to the Rock, a small, satisfied smile on his face. "You know," he said quietly, "moments like this don't make headlines, but they matter the most." The Rock nodded in agreement. "It's true. People don't see the quiet heroes in everyday life, but today we were part of that. We helped when it counted." The two of them walked away slowly, blending back into the crowd, leaving the little girl and her parents in peace. The experience had reminded them that heroism isn't always about fighting in rings or performing stunts. Sometimes it's about noticing when someone is in danger, staying calm and acting at the right moment. The little girl would remember that afternoon forever, not because of fear, but because of the kindness, strength, and calm assurance that appeared when she needed it most. The Rock and Cena's presence had been steady, firm, and reassuring, a living example that courage and care often go hand in hand. For the parents, it was a lesson in gratitude and vigilance. They realized that sometimes help comes from unexpected places, and even strangers can become heroes when they act with attention and compassion. The fear that had clouded their afternoon transformed into relief, gratitude, and a renewed sense of trust in people. As the sun began to set, casting warm golden light across the city streets, the Rock and John Cena continued their walk, quiet and unassuming. Their day off had turned into a real-life moment of courage and protection, a reminder that even ordinary days can hold extraordinary experiences. The child, safely in the arms of her parents, had learned that it's okay to seek help, that instincts can be trusted, and that bravery comes in many forms, even small acts, like trusting a stranger when it feels right. The Rock glanced at John Cena one last time before they parted ways. "Today mattered," he said simply. Cena nodded. "It did. And she's going to be okay because of it." The two men walked in silence for a few moments, reflecting on the simple, powerful truth of the day that courage, attention, And compassion can change lives in ways that fame and recognition never could. And for the little girl, the memory of fear faded, replaced by a lasting sense of safety, trust, and the knowledge that sometimes heroes appear when they are most needed, quietly, without fanfare, and with hearts full of care. The day was beginning to fade into evening, and the city streets were quieter now, filled with the soft hum of distant traffic and the occasional chatter of people heading home. The little girl's family had driven away safely, the memory of fear slowly being replaced by relief and gratitude. For the Rock and John Cena, the events of the afternoon lingered in their minds, quiet but powerful reminders of how much small moments of courage and attention could change lives. As they walked along the sidewalk, the two men reflected on what had just happened. Neither of them needed to talk much. There was an unspoken understanding between them. They had acted instinctively, calmly, and decisively, and the outcome had been exactly what they hoped for. A child was safe, a family was reassured, and danger had been stopped before it could grow worse. Sometimes, John said quietly, it's easy to forget that heroism doesn't have to be in front of cameras or crowds. Today it was quiet, but it mattered more than anything. The Rock nodded, his gaze on the city around them. Exactly. No headlines, no fanfare, just action when it counts. That's what makes a difference. That's what matters. The experience of the afternoon had left them both thoughtful. They had seen fear in the eyes of a child and understood how fragile safety could feel when it was threatened. And yet they had also seen courage, the quiet, brave kind that comes from trusting instincts and accepting help when it appears. Meanwhile, the little girl sat safely at home with her parents, her small hands clutching her backpack still. Though now with a sense of security rather than fear, she replayed the events in her mind. The tension of being with the man who had frightened her, and the relief when two strangers had appeared seemingly out of nowhere to protect her. Even now, hours later, she could feel the strength and calm they had shown, and it comforted her. Her parents were still close by, holding her hands and speaking softly. "You're safe now," her mother said gently. "Nothing can hurt you here. We are here and we will protect you." The little girl nodded, remembering the voices of the two men who had helped her. She could picture their calm, steady presence and their quiet words of reassurance. For a child, trust is fragile, and trust had been given and honored that day. Back on the city streets, the Rock and Cena had moved a little further, blending into the evening crowd. Though people passed by without noticing, both men felt a deep satisfaction. There was no need for recognition, no need for applause. The reward was knowing that their instincts and actions had prevented something dangerous from happening, that a child had returned to safety because they had been alert and brave. John Cena glanced at the Rock and said quietly, "You know, we don't get to see how many lives could be changed by moments like this, but today we saw it directly, and that matters." The Rock smiled faintly, a quiet warmth in his expression. "Yeah, and maybe that little girl will carry today with her as a lesson, that even in scary moments, there are people who will help, who will notice, who will act." Both men understood that safety and care often go unnoticed in everyday life. They had been in the right place at the right time, not because of luck, but because they were paying attention, observing, and willing to act when something felt wrong. Meanwhile, the little girl's parents began sharing the story with close friends and family, their voices filled with emotion. "We were so scared," her father said, but two strangers stepped in, calm, strong, and careful. "They saved our daughter today. We can't thank them enough." The mother nodded, tears in her eyes. It was incredible. They didn't hesitate. They noticed something we didn't even see at first. They acted immediately, and she's safe because of them. The child herself, though still small and young, began to understand the power of courage and help. She could remember the warmth of the Rock's presence, the calm reassurance of Cena's words, and how that made all the difference. Even if she never saw them again, she would remember that safety can appear in unexpected ways, and help can come from strangers with kind hearts. Back in the city, the Rock and Cena stopped for a moment on a quiet street corner. The sun had dipped lower, painting the sky,